Bobby Marks was there last night, ESPN front office insider, former front office member with the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets are in town. It's 1-1. Interesting comments after the game from Kenny Atkinson and also Brett Brown. But the players stepped up last night. Bobby, and appreciate you jumping back on the show. But it was a scene there last night. The Sixers, came out swinging, but only a 1-point lead at the half, and then a historic third quarter. Will we look back at that third quarter and maybe say that's what propelled the Sixers in this series?
Well, I think so. I mean, you basically saw the fate of the Sixers season in what would happen in that second half, just based on, they tried to put that Nets team away in the first half. They just couldn't do it. I think the resiliency of Brooklyn, that's basically been their identity all year. We saw that. And then, in the third quarter, things, I think there was a renewed energy. I think I guess they did flip the switch a little bit, and that's something that they are going to need for the rest of the series. I mean, let's face it. I mean, on paper, there's no reason why this series should be 1-1. I mean, it was startling last night, and when you see the introductions compared to what Brooklyn is starting, compared to what Philadelphia rolls out there, and I guess outside of probably D'Angelo Russell, there's no player on that team that could probably start for Philadelphia or even come off the bench out of the Brooklyn starting five. So. Yeah, you saw what we probably all thought this Philadelphia team would be. We certainly with Ben and Joel, Jimmy, I think we finally saw Tobias Harris show up for a playoff game, and we'll see what happens when we get to Brooklyn for Game 3 here.
Yeah, and obviously Ben was a big story last night. He was a big story in Game 1. But that Ben Simmons last night, Bobby, if the Sixers get that Ben Simmons consistently, I don't know if they're the favorite, but they can certainly make a much deeper run with that guy.
But you're right. I mean, I think you saw right off the first possession, although it was a missed shot. I mean, he was downhill all game. He was attacking the basket. He was setting guys up. We saw him post up a little bit too. He's, there's nobody that can, based on his size, if he wants to try to take over a game. He's basically unguardable. And then when you get Redick going and you get Jimmy Butler going, we certainly know what Joel can be when he's on the floor. But Ben basically he ignites that offense there.
Yeah, and real quick. Have you ever been around a player where it was that frustrating as to why some nights he's the guy you saw Saturday and why some nights he's that guy that can take over the game?
No, I haven't. And it's funny, and just talking with teams, it's like, is there another level to Ben Simmons? I mean, is this kind of what we are going to continually get? And yes, he's certainly an all-star, but I think, how can you get him to that all NBA type on a consistent basis like we did last night? And it's going to be fascinating because, you guys know, I mean, he's up for a big contract this summer. I mean, but is there anything else with his game can come along? I mean, are we going to see a player that, can, from the perimeter standpoint, we know the flaws there, or is this just going to be, this is who he is, an all-star level player, an 8-8 guy, but kind of plateau here?
Bobby, I'm just trying to think about explanations as to why sometimes we see his quote-unquote switch off and then switch on. Is it the dynamic with him and Embiid challenging? Like, do you think that could be it at times, that maybe he tries to take too much of a backseat, and because their games are sometimes conflicting, their styles of play, because Ben needs space, Joel needs space, they're both paint players. Do you think that dynamic is still being worked out, and that's why we see games like Game 1 from Ben?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think certainly. I think I saw a stat on Saturday that that starting lineup had, I think, only played 10 games together, based on with Joel being out towards the end of the year here. So you are still trying to figure out with Butler and Tobias also. But yeah, I mean, I think you could put Ben at 5 if you wanted to. I mean, you really could, and kind of work and play your offense to him. But you've got two players that, when they're out there, there's not much spacing, and I think they are still trying to figure out what they have here.
Bobby, when you were a member of a front office at the end of a season, do you guys sit with the player? I mean, like, how do the Sixers approach Ben? Do they say, look, we need you to start expanding your offense, or are they happy as long as he's attacking?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think when he's attacking, he's as we saw last night. He's as good as any NBA player. Out there, based on a lot of different things. But I think there's going to be a time where when is there a comfort level for him developing a perimeter game here? I mean, when do we get to that point here? And what is how do you try to put an off-season player development program to get in place? And we don't know. That could be the case already. What Philadelphia's been trying to do here, and when does he get to a comfort level? I was joking with another writer last night when I think Philly was up 30 in the fourth. I said, shoot, if I was Brett Brown, I'd just let Ben Simmons shoot jump shots the rest
Right.
of the fourth quarter here to see if we can get him going a little bit here. But yeah, I mean it's he's going to be going into year 4. This would be, the third year of him actually playing when you get into next year with that, the redshirt year as rookie year. And yeah, I mean, he's in line to make $160 million. So this isn't a player that's going to be on a rookie scale contract anymore. And when you're paying a player like that, a lot of money, it can't be because he's one dimensional. So I think it's going to be a time where he's going to need to expand his game here.
What are your thoughts on how Tobias Harris has fit, particularly in these first 2 games? But he came on strong with the Sixers, and then he kind of went quiet. I mean, like you said, they only played 10 games together as a unit. They're all trying to figure out where they fit in. But where do you see his role as the playoffs go on here for the Sixers?
I was encouraged last night by Tobias. I really was. I was concerned going into game 2, and I didn't realize this until I looked up, some of his stats that, outside of Saturday's game, I think he'd only played in 4 postseason games. So there's a difference between a player an 82-game player, regular season, who can play at an all-star level, and a guy when a playoffs start competes at that high level. And that was a little bit of my concern is that, can we get a playoff Tobias Harris? And yes, the game got out of hand a little bit last night, but I was encouraged here. I think when he is aggressive, he's dangerous. I think when he reverts to just a complimentary player, I think there's a tendency to kind of have him sit back and watch and react. But I think, they're going to need him. I'm not worried about what Jimmy Butler can give you. Jimmy Butler's been in a lot of big games here, and I'm not worried at all. But for this team, as much as they gave up, they are going to need a Tobias Harris to kind of get far here.
Bobby, I don't know if you've ever had this situation in your tenure working on NBA teams, but Joel Embiid, questionable, doubtful, telling them, hey, 15 minutes before the game I can play. How do you handle that as an organization? I mean, game 1, you can make an argument that maybe he shouldn't even have been out there the way that he kind of held him hostage a little bit, it seemed like. But he played well in the 24 minutes. He was still productive. But it seemed like they just weren't prepared for him to play. The game plan didn't look like they were ready for him to play. So how do the Sixers move on this postseason with the night-to-night frustration or, not knowing what Embiid's going to do?
Well, the hope is that as the series goes along, that he does get healthier, that his conditioning does get back to where it is, that maybe his minutes start to increase. And I think, yeah, it's hard because, he's certainly allowed on a minutes restriction here. And I think that's hurt because although Boban was really good last night, when, Embiid's out of the game, it allows Brooklyn to kind of get back in it just based on how the Nets play here. But, yeah, I mean, you're basically going into each game, I guess as a game time decision. I think if you're Brooklyn, you're planning on he's playing here. But yeah, it does make it challenging because you don't know that, during warm up something might not feel right, and now all of a sudden you have to kind of shift gears. Now all of a sudden your bench gets a little bit shorter here because now you've got Boban who can come off the bench and give you 15, 20 minutes. Now becomes a starter. Now you're relying on Bolden to kind of give you extended minutes here. So, yeah, I mean, it does certainly it shortens up your rotation.
Speaking of a shortened rotation and the bench, I mean, there was a lot of hot takes after the Game 1 loss, but some that were intriguing to me were the possibility of moving J.J. Redick and Tobias, one of them, to the bench. I don't think Tobias should be to the bench, but JJ, we all see at times how much he can get exposed on the defensive end. Do you see anything in the future that maybe Brett should make a move to Mike Scott in the starting lineup and JJ to the bench, or adjusting his minutes, or how does he handle that moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know if we're at that point yet. I think if they would have lost game 2 and you're going into Brooklyn down 2-0, then I think you can maybe start tinkering with what your lineup is. I think every game is kind of as you guys know in these playoff series, it's a chess match. I don't think you can if you're down 0-2, I think it's kind of reckless to roll out the same lineup here. But yeah, I think you did see JJ get a little bit exposed. I mean, these Brooklyn guards are tough. I mean, it's hard to guard them one-on-one. I think their foot speed kind of exposes Philadelphia a little bit with LeVert and Russell and certainly with Dinwiddie here. So I think Philadelphia did do a better job last night as far as from a game plan. But yeah, I don't know. As I said, I don't think we're quite there yet as far as when we're ready to make some changes, to the Sixers lineup.
Bobby Marks, ESPN, Sixers tied 1-1. Kenny Atkinson said last night that basically the intensity, that was the difference. They manhandled us. They beat us up in that third quarter. If Philadelphia brings that, I mean, should they basically walk through this series, or can the Nets raise their level and make this a 6-7 gamer?
Well, it's interesting, too. I mean, we won't see the same crew that we saw in game 2 that kind of let them play a little bit. You have a different officiating crew that you'll get Thursday night. I don't think it's been out who is doing the game. Does that group call it a little tighter? We kind of have 2 games as a baseline as how both teams play here. So we'll see as far as right off the bat, as far as if there's going to be a little bit of a quick whistle. But yeah, I mean, how physical Philadelphia was, especially that third quarter. I mean, Brooklyn couldn't even get off a shot here, but the officials let them play a little bit, and that was an advantage to Philadelphia. But if the series goes on like that and the officials do let them play like that, I think I would be surprised if Brooklyn gets a game at home.
There are times where I've been accused a lot of being too easy on Brett Brown, and my stance has been, look, I don't know if he's a good coach, a bad coach. My point has always been, Bobby, the coach's role is lower on the list of things of why teams win and lose. To me, I hold the players more accountable. 3 for 26, you're going to lose regardless of what the coach does a lot of times. And yesterday, a lot of people saying, wow, he made some adjustments and they made some changes. That being said, I think the players executed. He said it afterwards. We didn't change anything scheme-wise. We just did it better. But if you are giving Brown credit, was there something that he did that had an effect on the outcome last night?
Well, I mean, no, not really. I mean, I think they just played harder, right? I mean, can you give a coach credit for certainly can. I think they were a little bit more prepared than where they were. Saturday. I don't think Brooklyn played probably enough zone, so that kind of helped out a little bit here. But I just think this team kind of took a deep breath after Saturday. They knew kind of what the buttons were to push for against Brooklyn. I think just the effort level was there. And maybe that is a reflection of the coach as far as getting him prepared there. But I don't think he gave a big rah-rah speech at halftime last night as far as, up one, as far as the season was on the line. But I just think guys realized that there was a sense of urgency here, and I think that's kind of what we saw.
From the Sixers standpoint, I'm looking ahead a little bit, Bobby, but I'm just curious to see how the East landscape is going to play out and who's going to come out on top. From the Sixers' perspective, what do they need to be doing in this series to possibly get ready for the Raptors? Like, is there anything that you've seen? I know it's early. I know it's only through 2 games, but there's anything that you've seen or haven't seen where you can say it could be a problem when Toronto comes around?
I think they just got to stay healthy. I really do. I think that's why this has to be a 5-game series. I think they can't afford it to go 6 or 7 because, although you will advance, I don't know what you'll have left as far as from an energy, from a body standpoint, health-wise, as far as if it is a series against Toronto, which would be certainly another long series here. So, but that Raptor team's got their hands full. I mean, we'll see. I think it's tonight. I think against Orlando, they've got they're in the same spot that the Sixers were in last night, where, I mean, you cannot afford going down 2-0, losing 2 games at home here.
Yeah, and I know last night, that third quarter, it was really the first time Brett Brown had rolled out. I think he had Ennis out there, and he admitted in the postgame that it was tough telling TJ, hey, you're out of the rotation, but you make these tough calls here. And we were talking about this earlier, Bobby. It is hard for Brett to say, I've only had these guys for 10 games. Some of these guys on the bench I barely know. He's on the fly trying this out. But did he finally find something in that third quarter with Ennis and Butler and Tobias with Ben on the bench there? That seemed like a rotation that we had not seen with this team.
Length, when you have Butler and Tobias, and you said Ennis out there, really bothered Brooklyn, especially where – with Russell and Dinwiddie, Levert, guys who are 6'4", 6'5" there. So when you have big guards like that, like Philadelphia, or even, with Tobias, a big 4, that certainly helped. And just gives you a little bit of a different dimension. I think there will be certainly a role for TJ down the road. But I don't see a role, in this series. Could it be against Toronto, against a player like Fred VanVleet, possibly? Mm-hmm. But Brooklyn doesn't have small, they don't have little guards. I mean, they've got big guards here. So I think the big lineups that Philadelphia can put out there, I think that gives them an advantage.
Yeah. What changes in Brooklyn? You mentioned the officiating for one, which I thought was a great point, that really could change the dynamic. But Brooklyn being at home, to me, I look at that team. Somebody said to me last night at halftime, they're going to have to hit 10 more threes to win this game. They hit 10 threes in the first half, and, for them, they didn't hit any in the second half until the fourth quarter when the game was kind of out of hand. But you would imagine going back home, they're going to just keep bombing away. Is that their, key to success at home, just making the three?
Yeah, I mean, I think how their lineup is, I think there are the points during the game where they are challenged to score. Especially, there's really not a low post presence. Although the Russell Jared Allen pick and roll has certainly worked. But you basically put all perimeter guys out there. I mean, and it's basically you're firing away from three. Maybe it's ball movement, it's layups, it's cutting, but there's no mid-range game there. So it's basically kind of feast or famine. I mean, you saw it at the end of the first quarter in game 1, where a 3-point lead all of a sudden became 12 or 13, and that's how they got back in that game. Last night when it was, I think, 14, and then all of a sudden it's a 1-point game. It bombs away, and it can help, and it also can hurt, because when you start to get some separation like Philadelphia did last night, and when the defense gets a little bit tighter, there's no easy baskets. So I don't know if Brooklyn has a guy that you can just throw the ball down low like Philadelphia has with Joel or even Ben to a point. So that's going to be – I don't see the net style changing, going into Thursday night.
So if you're the Sixers, I know you touched on this briefly a few minutes ago, but with the Nets being limited to their identity and it's being clear as they're guard-oriented, they attack the paint and kick out for threes, if you're the Sixers, I mean, you just mentioned – go big, you have the size advantage on them, but then that does cause mismatches on the other end. Do you just stick with that and live with it, or do you think the head of the snake is go small for the Sixers and just completely take them off their game offensively?
I think you just play to your own strength. I don't think you change your lineup based on what Brooklyn rolls out there if they put a Jared Dudley at 5. I think the Sixers offense is potent enough where you can kind of, stick to your own as far as if you're going to play through Joel or play through maybe even JJ. That I don't think you need to kind of tinker just based on what Brooklyn is doing.
All right, Bobby, some games that are interesting. I think Denver and San Antonio is very interesting. Is Denver in some trouble?
Yeah, I mean, they missed a lot of easy shots in game 1, really down the stretch here. And I think it's hard to get, I think you're going to need some separation for them to get in a close game with I know San Antonio's got a lot of young kids, but with DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, kind of veteran guys like that, to get in a close game down the stretch is going to be hard, for this Denver team. So I think for them to win, they're going to need to kind of get out to a lead and kind of, keep themselves at arm's length. But yeah, I mean, now you've got a Denver team that was a 2 seed. If they can get a win tonight, is going to have to go on the road and steal a game here. So, we thought this was probably going to be a 6 or 7 game series, but yeah, I mean, I'm not ready to put them in trouble quite yet, but I think they're certainly concerned going into tonight.
Murray 0 of 6 from 3 in that game. What about Toronto at home against this Orlando team? Orlando, much like Brooklyn, Brooklyn was 8 and 18 to start the year, which means their record was pretty good, after that first month of the season. Orlando's a similar team. The last 4 months, Clifford has really got them focused and playing well.
Steve has done a really good job, and they don't have. I mean, outside I think Evan Fournier, there really isn't anybody on that roster with any playoff experience. Or DJ Augustin, I think a little bit too. But with they got some length with Gordon and Jonathan Isaac. Vucevic's an all-star. They've been basically playing for their lives the last, I guess, month of the season here. And I think, I know a lot of people don't say momentum doesn't carry over into the postseason. I think momentum carried over into the postseason for Orlando here. And Steve has they've got an identity from a defensive standpoint. He's kind of carried it over from Charlotte. And I thought it would be a Toronto in 5 here. I'm probably going to have to change that a little bit here. But I'm surprised. Based on this Toronto team, I thought we saw a lot of kind of the tendencies we've seen in the past where when it gets tight, this team goes ISO heavy. I think we saw that a little bit with Kawhi. Certainly Kyle struggled with his shot, but yeah, this is we've got another game that's must win for the home team tonight.
Yeah, and then the other one, Boston and Indiana set hoops back like 20 years with that game the other night. But Boston got a 10-point win. Indiana, this just shows in the playoffs they don't have Oladipo now. That's really coming out.
It's hard. I mean, Indiana's a great story based on what they were able to do post Oladipo. But when you kind of game plan against Bogdanovic, who's really their main scorer, and you can if you take him away, I don't know where else the scoring. You're going to have to really rely on Wes Matthews and Tyreek Evans and Miles Turner, guys like that to give you 18 to 20 points a night, unless you're going to get into a mud fest that we saw on Sunday afternoon. I think Boston just has too much offense, especially with Kyrie and Horford and Tatum, Rozier, Brown. So we'll see. I mean, I think if Indiana can try to steal game 2, we'll see. But I don't see Indiana having enough offensive firepower to kind of get through them.
ESPN's Bobby Marks Thursday night, Sixers Nets up in Brooklyn, and we'll have that game 8 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Appreciate the time as always, Bobby.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you.
All right, Bobby Marks, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.